Hello, and welcome to episode 40 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. My name is Sam Marvin. I am your co-host here with my co-host, Sean. Sean, how you doing?
Holy shit, 40 episodes.
Right.
It feels like last week we were recording Rings of Power, and it might be episode probably 200 by the time Rings of Power Season 2 comes out. So
yeah.
Who knows?
Well, hopefully, I haven't seen a ton of updates. I think they were, last time we talked about it, they were getting around the writer's strike, moving forward with Season 2. We both agreed that it was probably a good thing that the writers and the showrunners could not be anywhere near production, probably going to have a better product. But yeah, 40 episodes, and we're coming up on almost 9 months of this. Our podcast, if it were a baby, would be due anytime now.
You're putting weird images in my head, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
It's a weird photo for Facebook, maybe a little Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Thing logo and an ultrasound from Getty Images. There we go.
A fan fiction of
oh god,
Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. We're past seasons 1 and 2 of The Witcher, and season 3, the first 5 episodes at least, just dropped last Thursday, I believe, something like that.
Yep.
And we're here today to talk about season 3, episode 1. Overall thoughts. Oh, I did have one error from last episode that I wanted to address. We had the conversation of how did Volethmir know that Ciri was around, you know what I mean? Like,
okay, yeah.
Just the happenstance of Volethmir, like awakening and getting the 3 witches. They say at the very end of the last episode, as like just to connect the dots, Geralt goes, Ciri, when your scream or your powers broke the obelisk, that must have woken Volethmir.
Okay, I think I
but
put that in there as something as saying that's what they should have done. The fact that I said that's what they should have done, and that is what they did. Maybe that could have been set up earlier in the season to put this to show us the connected nature of Volethmir and Ciri, and show the consequences of Ciri's actions. It would then be reinforced by the various monsters and whatnot.
But again, to me, it's just a little bizarre to go through like an entire season, and then at the very end, right before the credits roll, you just like say what the answer was instead of showing us. That bothers me a little bit.
Well,
it seems like lazy writing. And you were just like, I feel like they got to the end of that episode and they were like, wow, we never really answered why Volethmir was able to like find Ciri. And then someone was like, well, what if we just have Geralt say,
yeah,
this must have been it.
People who are more experienced at screenwriting than the two of us, or the two of than we, should probably kind of tear this apart, season 2 apart, and maybe people have out there, just talking about basic principles of setup and payoff. You know, set up the connection so that they pay off in the climactic episodes, instead of have these kind of things just happen and then you are in the dialogue at the end of the episode when people are starting to tune out because of the dramatic climax has already happened. Then you explain why it was all so important. And I think actually, and shades of that are going to enter our conversation today for episode 1 of season 3. Mm-hmm. Little hint at what's to come. Any other corrections from our Witcher coverage up to this point?
That was the big one, because I remember us having the conversation and then I went back and just watched the tail end because there was something that I didn't quite understand. And then I heard that line and I was like, oh, we kind of shit on the writers for not giving an answer. And then they literally gave us
the direct answer. It was
Geralt was
filling out the quiz of what happened in the episode.
Thank you, Geralt, for just telling us what happened.
When in doubt, have your main character explain the point of the episode. Okay. Sean, would you like to recap episode 1, season 3 of The Witcher for the audience?
Do it. Reminder to all of our listeners that season 3 is going to be in 2 volumes. Volume 1, which was the one that was released last week, only contains the first 5 episodes. This is episode 1, entitled Shaerrawedd. Having left Kaer Mohren, Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri are on the run from bounty hunters while continuing Ciri's training as a witcher and a mage. After 6 months, they finally settle down in a home provided by Yarpen Zegrin. But when a monster attack orchestrated by Rience forces them to flee, the 3 decide to lure Rience into a trap. Francesca Findabair and the Scoia'tael are looking for Ciri, whom they see as the destined savior of the elves. In Redania, King Vizimir is delusioned with the spy master Sigismund Dijkstra and sorceress Philippa Eilhart's failure to capture Ciri, whom he intended to marry. So he entrusts the task to his brother Radovid. Jaskier, who secretly negotiates with Philippa and Radovid about persuading Ciri to go to Redania, is asked to help Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri with their plan. At the elven ruins of Shaerrawedd, they are confronted by Rience and the Scoia'tael, and a battle ensues. Yennefer learns of a powerful mage that is the mastermind behind Rience and suggests that they seek help at Aretuza. And that is episode 1 of season 3. It took me 2 watches, Sam, before I was able to calm myself a little bit, because I think I still had some negative feelings out of season 2 that when season 3 started, I just immediately I was defensive and I went negative. But in my second watch, I tried to distance myself from the book and take the show for what it is. And I was able to like it a little bit more. There's still things that we'll talk about that don't make sense to me. But overall, this first episode was okay.
Okay.
What about you?
I did not get a chance to watch a second time. So you're going to get my first impressions. I have had a couple of days to digest, and I did a little conversation with actually Haley and your mom when we were visiting your folks this past weekend. I will say it sounds like the position you're taking is similar to my approach to Rings of Power, which was separate it from the material, separate it from the base material, view it as its own standalone thing, which can help minimize the dissonance between the show and the book, but it still requires the show to stand on its own. And so we can have the conversation about the book standing on its own, and also the conversation about any dissonance between the book and the show. That being said, my first impression, this was a jam-packed to a fault episode. Not enough time was given to certain plot lines, and just too much was inserted into this one episode.
So let's split the episode up. Let's do the first part.
Do that.
Where we go, they gave us the first sentence of this summary that we read, and then it basically ends with them being forced to flee, 6 months of being on the run. That's kind of the first chunk of the episode, like the first third of the episode, I would say, probably. So let's talk about that. In season 2, I was really bothered at how much damage the Yennefer Ciri plotline would have caused to their relationship.
Yep.
That I didn't know how they were going to show me that they would build the trust between the characters, and they don't in season 3, in this one episode. They do a really good job with Geralt. Geralt won't even talk to her. Anytime they change homes, she has to sleep in a separate building or facility, separate area. Yennefer talks to him by writing letters and kind of taking a knife and sticking it in the door so he can read them. But then Ciri, it's like nothing happened. And it's from the books. It's that big sister, little sister relationship. mother-daughter. And Ciri just seems cool with it. And it's really weird because they even have a conversation later on where she goes, hey, remember that time when you like tried to sell me to a demon for your magic? And you don't see any animosity between them. And to your point, if you're going to have real development and not like mash a whole bunch of shit into this first episode, make this first part half the episode, show me the very beginning of being on the run with Ciri being pissed at Yennefer and Geralt also being pissed, and then show me that relationship developing. Show me how Yennefer was able to win her trust back. None of that's there, and I just don't buy that part of it. But yeah, what about you? That whole sequence of being on the run?
I did not like it. I did not like it, Sam. I am, and this is why. The relationship between Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri is the central family of the show. It should be, or they want it to be. So to your point, you have 5 episodes in this first half of the season. You have 8 episodes total. I'm gonna wager that there's gonna be some crap that the writers invented and put in. So take that out and give us 30 minutes of showing how they repair this relationship. Because let's not forget, Ciri and Geralt might also have a little bit of tension in their relationship, given the fact that Ciri, while she was possessed, murdered all of his friends. She might be mad at him for abandoning her, for leaving her with Yennefer, for whatever, right?
Okay. I found this on the web for while she was possessed, murdered all of his friends. Check it
out. Thanks, iPhone. Anyway.
That be left in?
Yeah, we probably should leave that in. So there are so many ways that you could do it. Don't give me a montage of them traveling around, which then we're told was 4 months of this is what they were doing. They wouldn't have gotten 4 months into this together if Geralt didn't trust Yennefer. He wouldn't be traveling with her. There would have been a very tense, very strained conversation between the two of them, maybe even the three of them, on day 1 when they were still at Kaer Mohren.
Like, so if you're gonna come with us, here's what's gonna fucking happen.
Yeah.
None of that was shown.
And you started the episode, and so I was taking notes on this, and my first note is dumb, no stakes fight scene, because the whole episode opens with Geralt alone fighting a bunch of guys at a barn in the middle of nowhere. I thought it was dumb because I don't know who these people are. I have no reason to care about them. It's a little too convenient that they just happen to. We don't show them actually tracking Geralt or anything like that. But there's a fight scene and he kills them all. Have it happen so that they get in a fight, but Yennefer saves him, and so that they can reconnect. They reforge their bond, where he begins to trust his life to her, and then Ciri's life, or maybe she saves Ciri, right? Like Geralt's killing 5 dudes, and then one of them sneaks up and is about to get Ciri, and Yennefer kills that dude, and then Geralt begins to trust her again, and then he's like, okay, you can travel with us, and then slowly their relationship builds, and then halfway through the episode they can start reminiscing about all the times they had sex.
Is that those scenes where the three of them at the end of this sequence, when Geralt has finally welcomed Yennefer back into the fold,
and they're playing house?
Yeah, those are the scenes that I like, because that's what we're trying to get to, but it just felt cheap because they didn't put in the work to get us there. You know what I mean? And again, like I said, it's because there was too much damage done from that second season in the relationships that I don't buy where they're at currently.
Yeah. If the audience is supposed to believe that Geralt will do anything, risk his own life to save Ciri, so jump through a portal to a location that he has no idea where it is. He doesn't know what's on the other side. And we're jumping ahead in the plot of this episode a little bit, but Geralt is going to go to some extreme lengths to protect Ciri, and we're supposed to also believe that he would have
found this on the web for
I'll call her Cirilla from now on. If we're supposed to buy all that, we would also not believe that he would be traveling around with Yennefer after what Yennefer did. And again, that plot line was a total invention of the writers. So they wrote themselves into this corner, and then they kind of used a shortcut to get out of it, and it falls short.
Come to the defense of the fight scene at the very beginning. One thing that The Witcher does really well is the fight scenes. Like, you may have disagreed with why they were fighting and the stakes of it, but it was still a well choreographed fight scene. And then as we get into like there's a big fight with the Scoia'tael and Yarp and Zegrin's dwarves. Cool fight scene.
Yeah. I mean,
well choreographed.
The show can still deliver those moments. I mean, I thought the encounter with the little jackapace or whatever later, next in this episode, that was good, but in pursuit or in service of what plot line?
Mm-hmm.
Right. The other thing, I don't like the CGI blood, right? When it goes slow-mo and then there's CGI blood, it just that was another thing. Maybe this is an overarching criticism. The look of the show has changed enough
from season 1. Yeah.
It's simultaneously prettier but also uglier, if that makes sense. Like Cirilla, because I don't want my phone to start freaking out. Cirilla's makeup is done so that she looks flawless, but you can also tell that she's heavily made up, which distracts from the fantasy that she's on the run and they're living in the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was another example of this. Well, Yennefer, Anya Charlotte's character, I think that's how you pronounce her last name. She looks very different. Her hair is longer, her makeup is different, and it's a little uncanny. And there were some other changes to, I think the look of Jaskier is slightly different, and it seemed like there was some digital airbrushing going on with a lot of the actors, and that's very distracting because it's supposed to be kind of a gritty medieval fantasy world, but everybody looks like they're on the cover of Elle magazine.
Mm-hmm. And it made sense for the sorceresses,
yes,
because that's their whole plot line. But yeah, every other character should have some flaws. One more thing in this first part of the episode, I really liked the development of the relationship between Geralt and Ciri. They show the scene of Geralt going hunting with her, bringing back the boar, and like Ciri jumping on his back, like that paternal relationship. They're developing that really well, but I'm not buying the maternal relationship yet.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One little stray observation here was they totally stole from the Rings of Power with Yennefer and Ciri trying to get that tree to bloom.
Mm.
And then it going too far and the tree falls apart. It was like the only thing missing was a little Harfoot way too close to the tree during this whole thing.
Anything else from that first section? Because then we can move on to the Rience and the plot trying to sabotage him.
Yeah, let's jump on to that part, because I think that's where there were some things worth commenting on.
Obvious actor change for Rience. And I didn't look into yet why the previous actor from season 2 didn't want to continue. But when you have like your main antagonist and your main protagonist so far jumping ship by season 3, that's a red flag, right?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is Rience isn't really a character, right? We know so little about him, except for what he looks like.
In terms of the show? Because in the books, he's pretty developed.
Yeah, I mean, what has the show given us? He was in prison.
He works for a master and is being tasked with bringing Cirilla. Yeah,
we don't really know anything about him. We don't get enough time with him, and that was one of the things that I didn't like about the way that they did the fight scene in season 2 with Rience, the Michelet brothers, and Geralt. In the books, that is very well developed. You get a lot more with Rience. You get to know about him through people who have dealt with him. We don't have a lot of that in the show. So his actor being replaced is very obvious, but the character is still kind of he's got 3 lines in this whole episode, and he's supposed to be
I think that's because they recast him.
Oh, you think they're just kind of writing around it?
That's my thing. Yeah. His face is way more scarred up. He looks way different. Yep. And the last actor as Rience had way more dialogue. And then this guy, he has 3 lines. He says one thing to the guy with the tracker beast or whatever it is, Jackapace. Then he has the lines at the fight. And then when his hands get fixed, those are the 3 scenes, and he's barely in it. And to me, I feel like when I watched it and I realized that it was a different actor, I didn't look at it as they're not using the character enough. I thought it was a purposeful move. Personally, that's how it came off to me. But
yeah, I mean, there was no coverage of this that I saw about they obviously Henry Cavill leaving is going to take up all the headlines, but you think there would be a little of something here. He was, to your point, a pretty central character in all of season 2, and he's going to be a central character in much or all of season 3.
Mm-hmm.
So you were talking about him being recast and his look, and where are you going to go from there with Rience?
Oh, that's it. That's my whole thing with Rience.
Oh, okay. So
you can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Well, I was going to say the Jackapace thing. And so this is a little where, did you watch the recap before season 1 started to show us everything that happened in season 2 and some of what happened in season? Okay, so I did. And they recapped every plot line except for the plot line explaining all of the people.
I was going to guess Ciri's blood and the Witcher mutagen.
Well, they alluded to that, or maybe that was actually in some dreams that she had. I can't remember exactly what. But what they don't tell us is who are all of the people looking for Ciri, and why. One of the major things that happened in season 2 toward the end was that all of the kings of the north, with Tessaya's involvement, put a bounty on Ciri and everybody that protects her. Parallel to that and predating that, you have Rience tracking Ciri at the behest of somebody who is yet to be revealed in the show. And then you've also had, toward the end of season 2, which I totally missed and I think maybe wasn't recapped, you have the fact that the elves under Francesca are also tracking Ciri.
Mm-hmm. And then you have Nilfgaard.
And then you have, then you have Nilfgaard.
And now you have Vizimir wanting to marry Ciri.
Yeah, it's kind of in a separate way from the king. And in that one, I mean, the plot summary said that he's upset with Dijkstra and Philippa Eilholt for their failure to get her. Did they even show the two of them attempting to get Ciri?
No, they just kind of wrote that off by being like, "It's been 6 months, you don't have her yet. You're failing me." Yeah.
So much of this was kind of hand waved that you don't. At one point, I made a note. Haley said, "I'm confused," because seemingly so many people are involved, yet we've only seen really one entity trying to get Ciri, and that's Rience, and that's the one entity who we don't know who's pulling the strings.
Mm-hmm. And then when we get to the Scoia'tael, they just happen to get there at the same time as someone else who's also trying to get Ciri.
That I wrote that at the time. That was like so fucking convenient.
Yeah.
But so with the point with Rience and all of the people, nobody is out to kill Ciri, as far as I know, right? Or the kings and Tessaya are. They're out
minus Vizimir.
So the one plot line, the one group of people who are trying to kill Ciri, we have not seen their efforts at all. We only see people who are trying to get Ciri for their own purposes, none of which involve murder.
Mm-hmm.
So why would Rience send a deadly tracking animal to find her and not accompany it to then steal her away? right? They go out of the way to demonstrate how deadly this beast is because it's terrifying and it eats raw meat through the doors or whatever, and then it just randomly tracks her across. And that's the other thing. And this goes to the point of, as a fantasy show, we have no fucking idea where any of the locations are in relation to one another. So did that Jackapace travel 5 miles? 50 miles?
Yennefer even says we're at like the end of the earth. She says that line, yeah. And that's one thing that the show has done a very poor job of showing us a map and letting us know where ththings are.
I mean, I was thinking of that brilliant scene in the Two Towers where Faramir and I can't remember his name. Do you know his name? The other ranger?
It starts with an M.
They're sitting there and they're looking at a map, and you're gonna look it up.
I'm gonna look it up. Yeah.
Okay. So they're sitting there and they're looking at a map, and it does the incredible favor to the audience of going, oh, there's Rohan, there's Gondor, there's Mordor, and they're like, you got Saruman over here and Sauron over here.
His name's Madril.
Madril? Oh, I would
Madril.
Would not have gotten that.
But yeah, so and
they could
it's
easily
an actual
have done
map.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could have had Vizimir and Sigismund saying, sire, the Adirnians are doing this, and the Temer, and here we are with Foltest in Temeria, and Nilfgaard is. You could have shown all of the players on a map, and then if you wanted to do something like other fantasy shows have done, including I think Rings of Power, if I recall correctly, you could have just zoomed into a portion of the map and then faded into Geralt and Yennefer at their fucking hut in the snow. Mm-hmm. It would have been so simple to put all of this in its proper context. But either way, you had this giant killer animal track Ciri specifically, because they used the blood, the mutagen, to track her down, and then it attacks her. So I'm pretty sure Rience isn't being paid to murder Ciri remotely. He's being paid to abduct her and bring her to a specific location. So that didn't make any sense. And again, it goes to my earlier point of, it was a cool spectacle, but how is it furthering the plot?
And if it's not furthering the plot, why did you add something that goes against your plot? Exactly.
Yeah. It undermines the competence of your main villain, or you're not your main villain. He's the heavy, I guess,
so far main villain.
Yeah. Main villain that we know of. I mean, here's the one thing that it did do. It brought Yennefer and Geralt together. It tightened their bond of trust because Yennefer intervened to save Ciri in putting her own life in danger, which is good. But you did it at the expense of a complete non sequitur of a fight scene with this animal. And I think all those scenes also set up that elf who is kind of a double agent for the Squayatail.
Oh, the one that was feeding the
like the Beastmaster's assistant is then like later walking around with the Squayatail, and like that's how the Squayatail know where Ciri is at the same time that Rience does. Anyway, so that's my thing with that whole series of events that involve Rience is it doesn't make any sense. Similar to how, and you've alluded to it, very conveniently, all of our parties rendezvous at the same location at the exact same time. Do you want to talk about that? You want to set that up for us, Sean?
Well, it's just, you have Yennefer, Ciri, and Geralt after this Jackapace attack. They go, oh, why don't we just lure Rience out and then we can kill him? And they use Yarpen Zegrin to like go to a pub or something, and he begins to share some hints, thinking that some spies are going to overhear it and understand what's happening. Word gets to Rience about them being a part of this caravan, and Rience attacks. Yarpen Zegrin and the dwarves attack. Geralt Yennefer fight. As you mentioned, Geralt follows Rience through a portal into some strange place up in the mountains. It looks like a castle, right? With like purple shingles and a very mountainous region. But then, all of a sudden the Squayatail show up and just are also there because they want Ciri. And the big part is that it takes away from that situation in the books when they're at Shaerrawedd, which this fight with the Scoia'tael is from the books, but in a completely different, they're fighting for a different reason.
Yeah.
Like the books.
Well, the emotional impact of that fight is totally different. It's really not about Ciri and Geralt at all. It's more about the members of Yarpen Zigrin's troop, and Ciri and Geralt are witnesses to that. And yes, it has an impact on them, but they're not the ones who feel the emotional resonance of that fight.
Yeah, in the books, the Scoia'tael, it's to show that the Scoia'tael are made up of dwarves and elves and gnomes that are fighting against the injustice of the Northern Kingdoms. They're basically terrorist groups, guerrilla warfare. The fact that they're willing to kill dwarves in a convoy shows the disconnect between or amongst the races themselves that should be fighting together. And instead, you have a fight where they're just trying to get Ciri. And instead of the two different factions of the same race being mad at each other, you have the Scoia'tael being mad at each other. And it didn't make sense to do it that way. I wish they would have stuck with the book on that one. And I know I said at the beginning of this episode that I was going to try to not to compare them, but in some instances, it's almost impossible to not.
Well, because they are adapting they are taking a scene from the book and completely altering the actual content and then the kind of overarching lesson or moral from it. Yeah. And it's I'm going to say it's offensive to a certain extent because it's just so we talk about screenwriting. It's just so clumsy and unnecessary and wasteful of screen time. It's wasteful of your source material. It's again, kind of insulting to the audience to put out a kind of a hackneyed scene.
And the big takeaways from this scene in general are Francesca's brother dies.
Good. I didn't like him.
Yep, he sucked. The rest of the Scoia'tael are now pissed at Francesca because they were lied to about why they were there. Geralt realizes where Reince is kind of where his hideout is, up in the mountains in some castle thing. And then Reince's wrists are both broken. And that's it.
Yeah. I mean, we should mention...
Reince isn't killed, so the luring him out doesn't work. A bunch of Yarpen Zigrin's dwarves are killed.
Which so much happens in this. It's funny because so much happens in this scene, yet none of the things I would understand if somebody's always like, Sam's always talking about how real people wouldn't do that or blah, blah, blah. And this is a fantasy show. I understand that. But even in fantasy universes, people are still people, even if they're dwarves and gnomes and elves, they're still emotional. Like we're not told that any of these beings are automatons that don't have feelings. If Yarpen Zigrin's crew gets slaughtered, it's going to be really impactful on Yarpen Zigrin. And it's going to be really impactful on Ciri, who is still a 14, 15-year-old girl. And that's where they miss this incredible opportunity. And I should say, we skipped over the fact that just prior to the oh-so-convenient three-way battle, Ciri, kind of out of nowhere, had this big speech about how she was going to become a queen and unite the various peoples of the realm and become basically the chosen one, like a combination of the president and also Jesus.
And then she just killed a bunch of elves.
Yeah, and then the people she's with just killed a bunch of elves, but also that came out of fucking nowhere. It would have been way more impactful and seemingly logical if that had happened after the fight, where she saw the brutality of humans fighting elves and humans and elves and dwarves and gnomes killing each other. And she's like, no, somebody has to do something to stop this. And if the elves think that I'm their savior, and if I'm this powerful being, I'm going to do something with this power, and I'm going to, make the world a better place. Instead, there's seemingly nothing motivating that desire. And then a bunch of really traumatic shit happens and we move on. very quickly because, we got to get Codringer and Fenn in this episode for some reason.
Boulder Parchment Dagger.
That was...
I hate it because I'm a Critical Role fan.
Yeah,
and everybody knows it should be Boulder Parchment Shears.
Yep.
And it felt like they were stealing it from Critical Role.
Yeah, I mean, it's a credit to you when you can steal, quote unquote, steal something and have most of your audience appreciate it without knowing that you're just ripping it off. Right? That's taking something that obvious, that memorable is so it's annoying. It's like, you can't even invent your own in-universe, in-world game for deciding things kind of randomly. You have to steal it from a different IP, right? Like, and the funny thing is, there is an in-universe. There's both a card game and like a chess game in the world of in the world of The Witcher, right? And it's I think it's a big part of the video games.
Oh yeah,
right?
I still have The Witcher 3 on my like downloaded library on my Xbox, so I can just go on and play Gwent because it's such a good game.
Yeah, and they have, I think in the book, maybe even during this sequence, Geralt is constantly playing cards or playing chess with the dwarves, right? Or Ciri's learning how to do it. Maybe
I don't remember.
Somebody's doing it.
But
you could have easily had. Sorry,
you could have just had Geralt say, not Geralt. You could have had Dijkstra say, "Round of Gwent." See who goes with Radovid.
Yeah,
and then
there you go.
Then you have the tie-in to like all the fans who've played the games going, "Oh my god, yeah, that's so cool." Instead, you're having fans go, "Wait, isn't that from Critical Role?"
Yeah.
Instead of like calling back your own property.
And I mean, and here's the thing: people who are familiar with Critical Role are going to know Boulder Parchment Shears, Boulder Parchment Dagger. People who aren't familiar with Critical Role are going to be, wait, did they just make a rock paper scissors reference? But and it was cool in Critical Role because that show is tongue in cheek comedy D&D, but this is a supposedly like low fantasy kind of grim medieval world where a reference like that, a joke like that is actual dialogue from characters who are not supposed to be funny,
seems out of place. My last note on this whole episode is, could that have been Henry Cavill and Freya Allen's last scene together? Because if I recall from the books, a lot of what happens at like Aretuza and stuff, Geralt is always like 2 steps behind her. And then he like constantly is like just missing her. And then
it could be. I think this may be their last scene together close. There may be something with them, he sees her from afar. But this could be their final, which again, why is that happening in your first episode? Right? Give us more time. Show us
if that's the case.
If it's the case, sure. But I mean, we know where things are trending. Right? We know that, and spoiler alert for people who have not read The Witcher.
At the end of episode 1, Yennefer says, "I'm taking her to Aretuza." So that's that. So and that's all we've revealed so far.
So there's going to be a separation between Geralt and Cirilla. But it would be more meaningful if we had more time with them. Instead, we get 1, 2, we get the training, we get the montage stuff, we get the cute scenes of them playing house, but you want more. And I think that's just what it is. There's so much emphasis on, get to the big fight scenes or have the big confrontations with have Francesca and the punk rock elf yelling at each other, instead of develop the emotional core of your show so it's meaningful when their lives are in danger or when they have to split up or when they have to make tough decisions.
Any last things on this episode before we call?
Oh my God, there's a bunch of random stuff. I mean,
you have a bunch of random stuff?
Oh yeah, if I may, if you will indulge me.
Let's do a rapid fire. Just
okay.
No background, just hit me with your notes.
So dark magic. They've invented a new type of magic, which is dark. So we're, because you have to demonstrate that Rience is the villain again.
Yeah.
Francesca does not seem like the type of person that anybody would follow.
Not anymore.
Like why is she the queen of the elves at all? She is a liar. She is incompetent. she is bad at persuasion. Is she even magically gifted? In the book, she's a mage, but does she do any magic?
Yeah, she's a sorceress. She does.
I mean, Yennefer just like force pushes her, and then she doesn't do anything in that fight. Did she contribute to the fight at all?
No, because she was incapacitated almost immediately.
Yeah, you think she'd be able to, like, force block, and then they would have their, Sith lightning duel or something like that.
Well, they've just made her out to be a character that sucks, which is
really frustrating. Okay. But it's like,
but her taking over, they cover that in the last season with Philivandrel, with he gets his ass kicked by Calanthe, and then they're like, "You can't be the leader. You fucking suck." And then they pick her instead.
What are her credentials?
She's a sorceress,
which they haven't done anything with that, right? I understand that you're playing devil's advocate here. I'm just saying they could go out of their way to show us why people follow her instead of constant references to fucking prophecies about things that. And then, okay, so I mentioned punk rock elf.
Mm-hmm.
You know who I'm talking about. A character who I think is unique to the show. There's a scene where there's an aftermath of an attack on a caravan, and they're pulling bread out of chests. Did you catch this? Their loot from the caravan is a bunch of bread.
Yeah, because they're struggling to get food.
Exactly. But who, in the world of medieval fantasy, who bakes bread and then puts it in a chest and then sends it on a caravan? It's nonsensical. Even in your fantasy show, it's one of those things where I get it. They're hungry. They need to steal food. And that's a great lead into, like, what is it? She says something like all elves will share equally now. So Francesca's basically a communist with, like, we're going to forcefully redistribute the bread to all of the various elves, those who fight and those who don't fight.
I think it's a nitpick on the bread for you, because it could have been going to like a village right next door. We don't know.
It's just one of those things where for people who maybe people have caught on to this, I'm a little bit of a fan of actual medieval history, to the point where, like, I will make a recommendation right here and now. Tudor Monastery Farm, folks. Fantastic series that I don't know if it's on the BBC, but it's very British. It is British. It basically goes through the annual calendar of life on a farm during the Middle Ages. And bread and flour was really central to their experience. You didn't send bread on caravans. Every village had its own bakery, and people would take, flour would make sense to being transported, but not bread. So that was just something that really pissed me off. There's tons of other stuff that you could do. Fish.
So I'll say to the listeners, Sam is probably the only person in the country who is annoyed by that because of the Tudor farm.
There are dozens of us. Okay.
You can forget that you heard him talk about bread and the Tudor farm for the last.
It doesn't make sense as a trade good because it is a low.
Okay, next point. Yeah, we're past it. Next point.
If they were transporting lead, that would make sense. Dense, valuable, useful. Anyway. Oh, we didn't even talk about Jaskier.
There wasn't much to say about Jaskier.
Well,
my only note on my phone about him, and we kind of moved past the point in the episode where he was brought up, was just that I was happy we didn't have to wait until like the last 2/3 of the season, like last season, before we finally got Jaskier. We got him in episode 1 this season, which made me happy.
Yeah. My note is that Jaskier's modern anxious tics are getting annoying. Book Jaskier is not this annoying. And I feel like they only have one gear for Joey Batty. And it's kind of a disservice. I don't know. Are you not with me on this?
Not necessarily. I don't find it offensive like you do. To me, the show is writing him pretty well compared to the books and the video game. That he always just tends to be like a sidekick who gets pulled into shit that he isn't qualified to be assisting with. And that tracks for me with what they've done with him.
Sure. I felt his role in the battle, the confrontation, the big fight scene of pulling the wounded members of Yarpen Zigrin's party seemingly out of danger was a little weird because, again, it was one of those things where there was no setup to that. Right. What would have been good is if there had been a different fight scene with lower stakes that could demonstrate that Jaskier's a coward and Yarpen doesn't like Jaskier, and there's tension there. And then Jaskier redeems himself by saving one of the members of Yarpen's band or something. Well, we've gotten that
in the first 2 seasons of the show. Yeah, there's dialogue between Yarpen and Jaskier that they don't like each other, going all the way back to 3 jackdaws and the
right. But you're demanding that your audience remember things from years ago at this point for 2 non-main characters. That
to me that's more of a problem of the season 1 being just a bunch of short stories.
Okay.
That if you would have developed and had Yarpen be an actual like side character instead of just being in, because if we look back at Yarpen's character, he's in that episode with 3 jackdaws in season 1. He's right where Geralt needs him to get a horse in season 2, just briefly.
Yeah.
And then he's in this episode because they need his help. So the character of Yarpen in the first 3 seasons of this show has only been in 3 episodes. So really, they're asking you to remember 2 different occasions where these characters interacted. But if you want to develop that a little bit more, they should have been.
It would have been an easy thing to do, and it also would have helped with making that climactic fight scene less ridiculous if you had a smaller one earlier on to establish the threat of the Squayatail. Because we get the aftermath of a Squayatail attack. Like, just, have Jaskier be there with one of Yarpen's men, and Jaskier runs off and leaves Yarpen's guy by himself, and he gets wounded, and then he like struggles back to camp, and Yarpen's like, what's your problem, you coward? You abandoned my guy. And then he can redeem himself at the end. Either way, minor point.
What else do you want to complain about?
I wrote punk elf warrior is right. Fuck Francesca.
Yeah, we kind of covered that one already.
We've covered that one. Then I said, is Radovid playing dumb or is he actually dumb? I'm actually intrigued by the answer to that, because Radovid is not in the books. He is, or not in the books in this point, but he is in the video games, right? He's pretty central in the video games.
Yeah, I think he's playing dumb, because we even see that at the end where Philippa's like, "You're pretty good at this game," and he's like, "Oh yeah, fake yawn."
I thought she was doing that to kind of flatter him.
I think she was too. But he didn't accept it. He was like, I know what I'm doing.
Okay, so he's seeing her flattering and acting as if it doesn't matter, or he's whatever. Okay.
Because he calls her Pip as well.
Oh yeah,
which
is needling her. Yeah. I think that's it. Overall, again, this is my first watch.
Middle of the road episode.
Middle of the road, and it's one of those things where you try. There were plot lines that should have gotten more screen time, more dedication, and didn't. And then there were things that it's very hard to. It's like things that need more room don't get it, and then seemingly a lot of stuff just gets accelerated, right? Like again, no setup, all payoff.
Trying to fit the 8-episode, 1 hour per episode format that they've created for this show seems to be doing them a disservice.
Yeah.
Because if season 3 could have been 12 episodes, then you have more time to develop things. But now they're like, all right, season 3, we're going to adapt Time of Contempt. We have 8 episodes, 1 hour per. Here we go. How do we fit it in? And it just seems like they're just shooting themselves in the foot at this point.
Yeah. I mean, the obvious comparison to me is Game of Thrones, where you had a book series that wasn't finished. And when you started off, you were adapting the books pretty faithfully. And it was 1 season per book. There weren't a bunch of new plot lines that you created on your own. Granted, you had the involvement of the author to help with some of the writing and things like that. But you potentially could have gotten the involvement of the author. I don't know. He's relatively hands off, but throw him some money and maybe he would get involved. But if you're going to, and the thing is, you have a completed series, so you know where everything is going. So if you need to trim to fit it onto the screen, you can, knowing that you won't cut your legs out from under you for the ultimate climax to the series, which theoretically could have been a danger with Game of Thrones. Now, I think Game of Thrones, they just got lazy and bored and they wanted to move on to other projects, so they sped up the final seasons, and they also didn't have books to go off of. But here, you have the books, you have the entire series, you know where things are going. That is your blueprint. Just do a relatively faithful adaptation of the book series, and you're going to minimize your risk. You're not going to piss off fans. No one is asking these people to be creative geniuses when it comes to screenwriting. Just adapt the show, or just adapt the books into your show, and you will be fine. Instead, things that we care about are excluded. Things that we don't care about are included. Characters are not developed. And, it's a middling, disappointing experience so far.
You heard it here, folks. Sam hates The Witcher.
I didn't say hate.
We'll be back next week with episode 2 of season 3. You can follow us on Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things on Facebook. You can send us an email, elvesringsandnerdythings@gmail.com. You can find our podcast at pretty much every podcasting site there is, an app. Bye.